Welcome to the Frame Podcast, our frame of reference where we delve into thought-provoking ideas and explore the depths of social, political, and cultural structures across the globe. I'm your host, Tom Gibbs. Today, we are diving into a challenging topic: why Kenya should be structured into tribal states. This episode is the first part of a series titled Rethinking Nationhood in Africa. We'll examine Kenya's colonial history, the consequences of its diverse ethnic landscape, and explore whether restructuring Kenya along ethnic lines might enhance stability, unity, and governance. In other words, or if you like it, we'll be making the case for the restructuring of Kenya and other post-colonial African states into tribal nation states that could later on their own, decide their political future without the hypocrisy of nationalistic-sounding phrases and slogans that end up serving the interests of majority ethnicities while keeping minorities occupied chasing mirages of nationhood that will never exist for them. Let's begin by understanding the historical background that shaped Kenya and many other African countries into the states they are today. Nationhood and state formation are the backbone of any society. But as we explore today, the origins of nation-states vary greatly across continents, impacting everything from governance to social harmony. In Europe, nation-states often developed around ethnic and cultural ties, creating relatively homogeneous societies. African nations, on the other hand, were born from colonial borders, merging diverse groups into single political entities. In Africa, borders were often drawn with little regard for existing ethnic groups, languages, or cultures. This disconnect has left countries like Kenya grappling with internal divisions, unequal representation, and persistent ethnic tensions. Many Kenyan ethnic groups, such as the Kikuyu, Luo, Kalenjin, and Luya, hold their own unique histories and identities. However, they are all placed under a single national framework that rarely reflects their collective or individual aspirations. Today, we are questioning whether these imposed structures are the root cause of Kenya's ongoing political and social struggles. To understand the depth of Kenya's challenges, we must first distinguish between the concept of nation and state. A nation is a collective of people who share a common culture, language, or ethnic background which gives them a unified sense of identity. Allow me to repeat. A nation is a collective of people who share a common culture, language, or ethnic background which gives them a unified sense of identity. Meanwhile, a state is simply a political structure with recognized borders, sovereignty, and governance. Most European countries transitioned into nation-states by the 19th and 20th centuries, aligning state borders with ethnic and cultural identities. For instance, Germany and Italy unified around common linguistic and cultural factors. This alignment has fostered social cohesion within European countries, as citizens often face or share a similar cultural heritage, language, or historical experience. African states, however, were constructed by colonial powers through treaties like the Berlin Conference of 1884, which partitioned Africa with little regard for existing ethnic divisions. This imposed structure often divided unified ethnic groups or grouped diverse populations into one state, leading to governance that struggles with cohesion and identity. In Kenya, a country comprising over ethnic groups, some of which have been divided and exist in different states, the result has been decades of ethnic competition for political power and even resource distribution and a lack of national unity. Kenya's political challenges are deeply rooted in its colonial history. When the British established Kenya as a colony, they grouped various ethnic groups into one administrative unit, laying the groundwork for a centralized government that neither understood nor respected the cultural distinctions within its borders. At independence in 1963, Kenya inherited a political framework designed to control, not to unify. The Kikuyu, Luo, and Kalenjin communities are larger ethnic groups that have since dominated national politics, while smaller groups like the Taita, Teso, or Kuria often face marginalization. Efforts to build a cohesive national identity frequently fail to overcome these ethnic divisions, resulting in a fragile national unity that seldom addresses the social disparities between Kenya's communities. Ethnic divisions often determine the distribution of resources and representation in Kenya. The question we must ask is, can Kenya create a genuinely inclusive national identity without addressing these deep-rooted issues? Or would a more radical approach, such as restructuring along ethnic lines, better serve the interests of its diverse population? The minority tribes in Kenya, with perhaps the exception of the Taita, have further been marginalized in the creation of counties. All counties, with the exception of Nairobi, are drawn on boundaries based on colonial districts, which, as may have been noted elsewhere, were informed by the boundaries of tribes. So, there are counties in which the Kikuyu are dominant, others in which the Luo or Kalenjin are dominant, while the minority tribes that live within these counties have no counties of their own. Therefore, while there have been claims, unsubstantiated of course, that devolution, which was entrenched in the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and which created the country's 47 counties, has taken governance closer to the people and devolved more resources and power, that is only true for the large tribes. The minorities continue to be subjugated in colonial-like relationships where they have to play second fiddle to dominant Luos, for instance in Migori, where ethnic apartheid has been entrenched against the minority Kuria, or the Iteso in Busia, where Luyas with a strong Luo affinity are dominant. In these counties, it is almost treasonous, for instance, a Kuria, to imagine they can become governor of Migori. And it is impossible, in any case, because the Luo, from their topmost leaders nationally and locally, would never allow it to happen. That cannot be said to be devolving power or sharing resources. It's a form of ethnic colonialism and ethnic apartheid. Europe offers important lessons in the power of ethnic cohesion. By aligning political boundaries with cultural identities, European states fostered unity and stability. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked a pivotal moment in history when countries like Georgia, Ukraine, and Estonia achieved independence based on ethnic self-determination. They built governments that reflected their distinct cultural heritages, fostering cohesion and reducing internal conflict. Another example is Yugoslavia, a multi-ethnic federation that disintegrated in the 1990s. The underlying ethnic tensions and desire for self-rule contributed to its collapse. In contrast, Czechoslovakia offers a peaceful example of separation. The Czechs and Slovaks split amicably, forming cohesive nation-states rooted in shared identity. Unlike Europe, where ethnic enlightenment often formed the basis for statehood, Kenya's national identity struggles to reconcile its diverse ethnic backgrounds. Although Kenya's 2010 constitution introduced efforts for devolution and inclusivity, as we have noted in the foregoing, the core problem remains the deeply rooted ethnic divisions formed during colonialism and which benefit the majority ethnicities at the expense of downtrodden and oppressed minorities. Efforts at creating a sense of Kenyan patriotism can sometimes mask underlying inequalities. Instead of fostering unity, it sometimes leaves smaller ethnic groups feeling more alienated, as larger communities dominate key political and economic sectors. Would restructuring Kenya along ethnic lines, inspired by European models of self-determination, allow these communities to govern in ways that genuinely reflect their cultural values and needs? Today, we've journeyed through Kenya's historical challenges in forming a united state or unified state within colonial boundaries. By comparing Europe's self-determined nation-states with Kenya's colonial legacy, we've raised thought-provoking questions about Kenya's future. Could restructuring Kenya along ethnic lines bring true cohesion and equality? In our next episode, which you should not miss, we'll delve into the history of the Soviet Union's breakup, examining the role of ethnicity in the formation of new states. As we continue this series, we'll keep exploring if ethnic self-determination might offer a path forward for Kenya and other African nations. Thank you for joining us on The Frame in this episode. Don't forget to subscribe and join the conversation as we rethink nationhood in Africa. I am yours truly, Tom Gibbs. Until next time.